My name is Lauren. I always considered myself a devoted wife and caring mother. But one sunny morning, while I was decorating the garden for a party, everything changed. Who could have thought that a simple gesture of help would awaken new, long-forgotten feelings in me? How far can our desires go, and how can they change our lives? This story is about how one accidental touch turned my life upside down. Read on if you want to know how this unexpected twist of fate ends. I was standing on top of a shaky ladder, wrapping lights around our patio. The sun was shining brightly, filling the backyard with warmth and joy. Preparing for my daughter Casey's birthday always brought me pleasure, even if most of the work fell on my shoulders. My husband, Greg, was often too busy to help. The ladder beneath me was slightly trembling, but I continued my work, having gotten used to these minor inconveniences. At that moment, I heard a voice that made me startle. "Hi, Mrs. Watson. Do you need help?" The voice was deeper than I remembered, and as I turned, I nearly lost my balance. Standing before me was Michael, the son of my best friend Sarah. "Oh, Michael, thank you. I would really appreciate that," I replied, trying to remain composed as I climbed down the ladder. He stepped forward to steady it, and our hands briefly touched. That simple touch sparked an unexpected surge of emotions within me. "I just got here and noticed you could use some help," Michael said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "That's very kind of you," I replied, leading him to the garden where the rest of the decorations awaited. Working together, I couldn't help but notice his presence. His confident, light movements were mesmerizing, and every time our hands accidentally, my heart started to beat faster. "How's college going?" I asked, trying to strike up a light conversation, but my voice betrayed a hidden interest. "Great, Mrs. Watson. The usual mix of studies and social life, but it's nice to be back home." "Everything seems calmer compared to the campus," he replied, smoothing out a tablecloth with ease. I laughed, but my laughter sounded slightly nervous. "I can imagine. We've all missed you. Casey talks about you often." "Hopefully only good things," he replied with a light smile, temporarily dissolving the growing tension between us. "Only the best," I assured him, our eyes meeting for a moment that seemed endless. In that moment, I realized that a simple touch and a smile could ignite feelings I had long forgotten. As the evening drew closer, shadows began to stretch across the lawn and guests started to arrive. The party came alive with sounds of conversation and laughter. Nevertheless, the hidden spark that had ignited between us during the preparations continued to smolder, connecting us with invisible threads among the crowd. When the party began, I noticed Michael among the guests. He quickly attracted attention with his charisma and infectious laughter. Our paths crossed again at the drinks table. Michael, being the center of attention, was telling a funny story, his audience hanging on every word. When he saw me, he paused and handed me a glass with a conspiratorial smile. "Mrs. Watson," he greeted me, "save the last glass of Casey's favorite drink for you." "Thank you, Michael. I think I really need this," I replied, our fingers touching again, and that familiar spark shot through me. I took a sip to hide my embarrassment, aware of the intrigued looks from nearby party-goers. We slowly moved to a more secluded part of the garden, where dim lights and a private atmosphere allowed for a more intimate conversation. Our laughter and light jokes continued, isolating us from the rest of the party. "Lauren," he began, addressing me by my first name for the first time, his voice sounding almost intimate. "What's life like in the suburbs? Surely it's not all parties and home renovations." I laughed, feeling unexpectedly at ease. "Oh, it's wild. Sometimes choosing paint colors feels like the most exciting decision of the day," I replied with a smile. He laughed too, his eyes lingering on mine a moment longer than usual. "Sounds thrilling. Maybe you need more excitement in your life," he suggested, his voice low and inviting. Before I could reply, Casey's voice cut through the tension, her tone playful, but tinged with curiosity. "Seems like you've charmed the most important lady here, Michael," she exclaimed, drawing laughter from those around us. Blushing, I managed a light response. "Casey, you know I've always had a soft spot for your family." My voice was light, but my heart pounded with thrill and trepidation. Michael gave me a quick, inscrutable look before smiling at Casey. "Just keeping good company, Mum." The entire evening passed in a blur of fleeting glances and whispered conversations with Michael. Each interaction sent a thrill through me that I struggled to suppress. His question about needing more excitement in my life echoed in my mind, challenging the boundaries of my comfort zone. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I felt a mix of relief and disappointment. The night had revealed more than I expected. Saying goodbye to Michael, our hands lingered briefly, his touch a silent promise of unresolved feelings. "Good night, Lauren," he whispered. His voice meant only for my ears. "Good night, Michael," I quietly replied, feeling a mix of guilt and anticipation in my chest. After that party, I tried to return to my normal life, but thoughts of Michael kept haunting me. Every time I passed by the garden or saw the lights we hung together, our brief touches and conversations would resurface in my memory. It was madness. How could I allow myself to be infatuated with the son of my best friend? Greg was, as always, immersed in his work, and our conversations were limited to discussing business and taking care of Casey. This was our routine. But now it felt suffocating. One of those days, I decided to leave the house and spend time at my favorite cafe to distract myself and find some peace. When I walked in, the doorbell greeted me, mixing with the aromas of freshly brewed coffee and pastries. The cafe had always been a haven for me, a place where I could escape the daily hustle. After ordering my usual cappuccino, I looked for a seat and unexpectedly stumbled upon Michael, sitting in the corner with a laptop. "Lauren, what a pleasant surprise," he exclaimed upon seeing me. He waved, inviting me to join him. My heart started beating faster, and I felt a blush creeping up my cheeks. Approaching his table, I tried to stay calm. "Hi, Michael. I didn't expect to see you here," I said, sitting down opposite him. "Yes, I like to change study spots. It helps me stay focused," he said, closing his laptop and giving me his full attention. "Care to join me for a coffee?" "I already got mine, but thank you," I replied, raising my cup. A comfortable silence fell between us, in which all the tension from our last conversation seemed to disappear. Michael broke the silence, leaning in slightly and lowering his voice as if to share a secret. "You know, Lauren, you're not at all what I expected Greg's wife to be." His words surprised me and I felt my heart skip a beat. A mix of curiosity and concern in my voice. "I don't know," he replied, looking at me thoughtfully, probably more reserved. "But you turned out to be so lively and interesting." I couldn't help but laugh, feeling flattered and slightly nervous. "I'll take that as a compliment, Michael. Thank you." Our conversation flowed smoothly from one topic to another. Favorite books, movies, personal dreams. We discussed things I hadn't talked about even with Greg for a long time. Michael listened attentively, and his responses were thoughtful, making me feel understood and connected on a deeper level. When it was time to leave, Michael moved closer, his voice soft. "I really enjoyed this time, Lauren. Maybe we could do it again sometime?" My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't believe my readiness to continue this strange attraction. "Yes, I would like that too," I replied, surprised by my honesty. We said goodbye at the cafe door. And as I walked to my car, I felt the desire to see him again take hold of me. This unexpected meeting pushed us deeper into dangerous territory, and while retreating seemed logical, I felt it becoming increasingly difficult. The allure of the unknown pulsed through me, igniting a sense of life I hadn't felt in years. Several days passed since our meeting at the cafe, and my emotions constantly swung between excitement and guilt. Memories of Michael and his words wouldn't let me rest. Every time I passed by the cafe, Those thoughts would reignite, making me shiver and simultaneously feel pangs of conscience. "This is madness," I kept repeating to myself. But deep down, I knew it was more than just desire. It was a feeling I couldn't ignore, despite all its consequences. One rainy day, as I struggled with a frozen computer, I suddenly remembered that Michael had mentioned his knack for solving technical problems. Before I could think it through, I dialed his number. The phone rang, and Michael answered almost immediately, his voice warm and welcoming. "Hi, Lauren. What's up?" "Michael, I'm sorry to bother you," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm having some computer issues. You mentioned you were good with these things. Could you help?" "Of course, I'll be right over," he replied without hesitation. When he arrived, the tension in the air was palpable. Michael sat down at the computer, and I stood nearby watching his confident movements. Our shoulders accidentally brushed, sending a familiar wave of energy through me. "Just need to tweak a few settings," he murmured, not taking his eyes off the screen. Our faces were closer than we had anticipated, and looking into his eyes, I realized that avoiding this attraction would be difficult. Our lips met in a gentle yet passionate kiss, which soon deepened, expressing all our suppressed emotions. When we pulled away from each other, I could barely breathe. "We can't continue this, Michael," I whispered, my voice trembling, realizing I was saying this more to myself than to him. "I know, Lauren. I'm sorry," he replied, avoiding my gaze. We finished fixing the computer in silence, and Michael quickly left, leaving me with a whirlwind of emotions. As soon as the door closed behind him, I leaned against it, trying to collect my thoughts. Every touch, every kiss left an indelible mark on my soul, and I realized that this was far from over. A few weeks had passed since the party and our last encounter with Michael. I tried to keep my distance from him, but thoughts of him constantly resurfaced. Greg was absorbed in his work, and I felt increasingly lonely. One morning, as I was making breakfast, my phone rang. It was Michael. "Lauren, hi." His voice was warm and pleasant. I was thinking, maybe we could meet and talk. I feel like we need to discuss what happened. My emotions were mixed, but I agreed. "All right, Michael. Let's meet at the Lavender Garden Cafe," I suggested, hoping the familiar atmosphere would help me stay calm. I put on a short sea green skirt and a form-fitting blouse that accentuated my figure. In the mirror, I saw a confident woman, but inside, a storm was brewing. At the cafe, I saw Michael sitting at a corner table. He stood up when I approached, his eyes lingering on my outfit. "Lauren, you look stunning," he said, as I sat down across from him. I felt my cheeks start to flush. "Thank you, Michael. What did you want to talk about?" I asked, trying to start the conversation on a businesslike note. "About us," he replied, not taking his eyes off me. "I can't stop thinking about you. I know it's wrong, but I want you to know how I feel." His confession was overwhelming, and I felt my heart beat faster. We talked about our feelings and what we needed to do next. I tried to maintain distance, but each glance and word brought me closer to him. When our conversation came to an end, Michael suggested a walk. We left the cafe and walked along an alley lined with blooming trees. The air was filled with the scent of lavender, giving our walk a romantic touch. At one point, he stopped and took my hand. "But I can't fight this feeling," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. I looked at his face, into his eyes full of sincerity and desire. Before I could think, I pulled him close and kissed him. The kiss was filled with passion and desperation. His hands wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer, and I felt his fingers brush the edge of my skirt. Our lips danced in a seemingly endless embrace. I felt his breath on my skin, his warmth penetrating every cell of my body. The kiss grew more passionate, and I forgot about everything, lost in the moment. When we finally pulled away, our faces were very close, and our breaths mingled. His eyes looked at me with such depth that I felt my knees begin to tremble. "Lauren," he whispered, his voice filled with passion and pain. "I can't hide this anymore. I want to be with you." My thoughts were tangled, but I knew one thing. I wanted to be with him too. This moment, this kiss, this confession, all of it was real, and I could no longer deny my feelings. "I do too, Michael," I whispered back, feeling my heart fill with both joy and fear. We stood there, embraced, savoring the moment, knowing that difficult decisions lay ahead. But at that moment, all that mattered was us, our feelings and our desire to be together. The next few days passed in a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about Michael and our kiss. We tried to stay away from each other, but our attraction was too strong to ignore. Each meeting, whether accidental or deliberate, every word and glance only intensified our desire. One of those days, I received a message from Michael. "Lauren, let's meet in the park by the old fountain. I need to talk to you." My heart raced and I knew I couldn't refuse. I chose a light ivory-colored dress that softly hugged my figure and highlighted my curves. This dress always made me feel confident and light. When I approached the fountain, Michael was already waiting for me. He looked tense and anxious. Our eyes met, and I felt the spark between us ignite once more. "Lauren," he began, his voice trembling with emotion. "I can't hide this any longer. I think about you every day, every minute." I stepped closer and our hands met. His touch was like an electric current running through my body. "Michael, I can't stop thinking about you either," I replied, feeling my eyes fill with tears. "But we have to be careful. This could ruin everything." He pulled me closer and our lips met in a hot, passionate kiss. His hands wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer. And I felt his fingers gently touch my skin through the thin fabric of my dress. The kiss was filled with desperation and desire, and I felt every cell in my body responding to his touch. "Lauren, I want to be with you no matter what," he whispered, pulling away from my lips and looking into my eyes. I knew our feelings were too strong to ignore. This kiss wasn't just a manifestation of passion. It was an acknowledgement that we couldn't live without each other. "I do too, Michael, but we need to be careful," I replied, trying to maintain a semblance of common sense. We spent several hours together, walking in the park and enjoying each other's company. We talked about our feelings, our fears, and how to handle this situation. Every word he said, every glance only strengthened my desire to be with him. "Lauren, I don't want to lose you," he said when we stopped at a bench, under the shade of a large oak tree. "Let's meet in secret, until we figure out what to do next." I knew it was risky, but the thought of not seeing him anymore was unbearable. "All right, Michael, we'll be careful," I replied, feeling my heart torn between joy and fear. Our lips met again in a passionate kiss. I felt his hands slide over my shoulders, gently touching my skin. His touches were filled with love and desire, and I couldn't resist the feeling. My hands wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, and I felt his heart beating in sync with mine. These secret meetings became our sanctuary. We met in the park, in secluded spots where no one could see us. Each of our dates was filled with passion and tenderness. We cherished every moment, knowing it could end at any time. One evening, as we sat on a bench under the stars, Michael took my hand and looked into my eyes. His voice was quiet, but each word penetrated my heart. My eyes filled with tears, and I squeezed his hand. "I love you too, Michael," I whispered, feeling my words filled with truth and strength. We spent that evening embracing and enjoying each other's warmth. Our kisses were gentle and passionate, each one a declaration of love and devotion. We knew that difficulties lay ahead, but at that moment, all that mattered was our love and our desire to be together. These secret meetings became a light in our dark days. We found in each other what we had long lost in our lives. Our love was forbidden, but that only heightened our desire to be together no matter what. Several weeks had passed since our last meeting, and every day without Michael felt like an eternity. We kept in touch through messages and calls, but the desire to see him, to touch him, grew stronger each day. One of those days when Greg was at work and Casey was at a friend's house, I received a message from Michael. "Lauren, I want to see you. Can I come over?" I knew it was risky, but I couldn't refuse. I replied briefly, "Yes, come." My hands were trembling, and I felt my heart beat faster in anticipation. I chose a short khaki skirt and a form-fitting blouse. Deliberately, I didn't wear any underwear, wanting to heighten the intensity of the moment. When I heard the knock on the door, my heart skipped a beat. I opened the door and saw Michael, his eyes burning with desire. We exchanged brief glances, and he stepped into the house, closing the door behind him. "Lauren, you look stunning," he whispered, his voice low and husky. "Thank you, Michael." "I've missed you so much," I replied, feeling my cheeks begin to flush. We stood there, looking at each other, until the tension between us became unbearable. Michael moved closer and leaned in to kiss me. Our lips met in a passionate kiss, and I felt his hands wrap around my waist, pulling me closer. "Lauren, I can't wait any longer," he whispered as our lips parted for a moment. "Neither can I, Michael," I replied, feeling my knees start to tremble with desire. His hands slid over my waist and began to carefully remove my skirt. I felt his fingers touch my skin, sending shivers all over my body. When the skirt fell to the floor, I saw his eyes widen with desire. "You're so beautiful, Lauren," he whispered, his voice trembling with passion. Michael kissed me again, and I felt his hands slide under my blouse, gently removing it. Our bodies were close, and I felt every touch, every emotion. His lips moved down my neck, leaving hot kisses that made me shiver with pleasure. "Lauren, I want to be with you," he whispered, his voice filled with sincerity and passion. "I do too, Michael," I replied, feeling my words filled with truth and strength. We couldn't hold back any longer. Our bodies merged into one, and I felt his hands gently touching my skin. He was careful and attentive, each of his gestures filled with love and passion. I felt every movement, every breath, and it filled me with a sense of bliss and happiness. Our movements became more intense, and I felt the passion consume us entirely. His lips found mine again and again, each kiss like a confession of love. We lost ourselves in the moment, forgetting everything else but our feelings and desires. When we finally stopped, our bodies were entwined and tired, but filled with happiness. I looked into his eyes and saw love and devotion in them. "I love you too, Michael," I replied, feeling my eyes fill with tears of happiness. We lay there, enjoying each other's company, understanding that our love was stronger than any obstacle. This moment was ours, and we knew we would fight for our love no matter what. Several days had passed since that intimate evening with Michael. At first, I was immersed in the euphoria of our feelings, but over time, the guilt began to grow. I couldn't stop thinking about Greg, and how I had betrayed his trust. Greg was very dear to me, and our family had always been my top priority. I realized that I had made a huge mistake and needed to fix it. One evening, after Casey had gone to bed and Greg returned home late from work, I decided it was time for an honest conversation. I prepared a light dinner and, gathering my courage, invited him to sit down. He looked at me with surprise, but sat down at the table. "What's going on, Lauren?" he asked, his voice full of care and concern. I took a deep breath and started to speak. "Greg, something has been wrong between us for a long time. We've grown apart, and I feel like I've lost you. I made a huge mistake. I cheated on you with Michael." His eyes widened in shock, and I saw the pain in his gaze. He remained silent, processing my words. "I know it's hard to hear, and I'm not looking for excuses, but I want you to understand that it was a moment of weakness. I still love you and want to save our family. I continued, tears streaming down my cheeks. Why, Lauren? Why did you do it? He asked, his voice trembling. We grew distant from each other. I felt lonely and unneeded. You were so absorbed in work and we had no time for each other. I made a mistake and I'm very sorry, I replied, feeling the pain and guilt fill my heart. Greg sighed and looked at me with sadness. I'm to blame too, Lauren. I didn't give you enough attention. I thought working hard was the best thing for our family, but in doing so, I neglected the most important thing. You, he said, his voice filled with regret. We sat in silence, reflecting on our words. Then, Greg approached me, took my hands in his and said, we need to discuss our problems and try to fix everything. I don't want to lose you and our family. You mean so much to me, Lauren. I nodded, feeling relief wash over me. I don't want to lose you either, Greg. We need to work on our relationship to restore the connection we once had, I replied, squeezing his hands. We decided to seek the help of a family counselor to address our issues and find solutions. We started spending more time together, discussing our feelings and desires. Gradually, step by step, we began to rebuild our bond. One evening, as we sat in the living room after a family session, Greg looked at me with tenderness and said, Lauren, I understand why it happened and I forgive you. We both made mistakes, but I believe we can overcome this. I love you and want our family to be happy. I felt tears stream down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of joy and hope. I love you too, Greg. Thank you for understanding and for being willing to give us a second chance, I whispered, hugging him. Our relationship didn't become perfect overnight, but we were both determined to work on it. We began to rediscover each other, finding joy in the little things and appreciating every moment spent together. In the end, we realized that our love and family were the most important things in our lives. We had overcome challenges and emerged stronger and closer. This situation taught us to value each other and avoid making the same mistakes. We knew there would be more difficulties ahead, but we were ready to face them together, hand in hand, with love and support. Several months had passed since Greg and I decided to start anew. We put all our efforts into rebuilding our relationship, and each day was filled with new discoveries and joys. The time we spent together helped us rediscover each other, and we became closer than ever. After a long day at work, Greg came home with a bouquet of my favorite flowers, roses. It was a pleasant surprise, and I felt my heart fill with warmth. Hi, honey, he said, smiling and handing me the flowers. Hi, Greg, I replied, accepting the bouquet and feeling tears of joy well up in my eyes. Thank you, this is so sweet. We sat together on the couch, enjoying the quiet and warmth of each other. I leaned into him, feeling his strong arms embrace me, and I realized that this moment was exactly what I had always wanted. Lauren, I'm so glad we were able to overcome everything and find each other again, Greg said, his voice full of sincerity and love. You mean so much to me, and I'm willing to do everything to make our family happy. I feel the same way, Greg, I replied, looking into his eyes. These past few months have shown me how much I love you and how important our family is to me. I promise to always be there for you and support you in everything. We hugged, enjoying each other's warmth, and I felt how our mutual efforts had borne fruit. Our love had become stronger, and we understood that we could handle any difficulties if we worked together. The next day, we decided to spend time together as a family. We went on a picnic to the park where I once met with Michael. Now, this place had a new meaning for us, a symbol of a new chapter in our lives. Casey was thrilled about the day spent outdoors. We played ball, picked flowers, and enjoyed the delicious food Greg had prepared. At one point, I looked at Greg and saw him laughing and playing with Casey, and I realized that this was true happiness. As the evening came to an end, we sat together on a blanket, watching the sunset. Greg held me close, and I felt his warmth permeate every cell of my body. "Lauren, I want you to know how grateful I am for everything we have. You and Casey are the most important things in my life, and I will never let us drift apart again," he said, his voice full of determination and love. "I feel the same way, Greg," I replied, feeling my heart fill with joy and gratitude. "We've been through so much, but it has made us stronger. I know we can handle any challenges if we face them together." We sat there, embraced, watching the sunset and feeling our hearts beat in unison. This moment was a symbol of our rebirth, a new chapter in our lives filled with love and hope. We knew that new challenges awaited us, but we were ready to face them together, supporting and loving each other. This story is about forgiveness, love, and the strength of family. We realized that even the darkest moments could lead to light if we were willing to fight for what we held dear. Our family had become stronger, and we were ready for new challenges, knowing that together we could overcome anything.